at all. So we're on to our last session of the day. We're running, we're running about 5-10 minutes ahead of time, which is probably unheard of for an online event. But yeah, so we're on to our last talk. And as our last session of the day, I want to introduce to you Thierry Ngutegure from Rise at 7. And Thierry's the Data and Insights Manager, responsible for overlooking everything data and research orientated at the agency. He's a self-confessed expert in data-led insights with roots in biological sciences and consumer economics, ensuring that he can make sure the audience is always at the core of everything he and his team do. So today, Thierry will be sharing different tools, sources, and techniques that he uses to develop and deliver a data-led PR strategy that smashes your KPIs. I've seen the deck. It's a really, really great session, and I hope you will enjoy it. Take it away, Thierry.
Awesome. Right, can everybody see me? I'm expecting a crowd to reply there.
We can.
No, that's all right. Right, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Awesome. So, I'm just going to be going through today, just as James mentioned there, is how to kind of maximize our data-led strategies, what are the tools and resources that we use, and other types of techniques that I kind of bring into play when I'm working with, whether it's the SEO or the digital PR context, and making sure that we kind of maximize our digital PR campaigns, as it were. So my title is quite an interesting one. So how I went from spending 100 grand to £0 a year. And I'll just quickly take you through that. So yeah, this is me. That is an egotistical version of myself pre-COVID. I'm definitely a bit of a quarantine catfish at the moment, so I do apologize. But just as James mentioned previously, I kind of center around research for the purpose of PR, data-led news generation, using internal data for the purpose of SEO and PR. That's quite a big portion of my job role here. Tracking brand and social sentiment, and also cool AF digital data visualization. So big fan of those. If you've got any kind of loves or questions in and around those topics, please grab me on Twitter. Feel free to either tweet me or DM me. I don't mind. I kind of love talking about those topics, so just let me know. Sweet. So just wanted to start with a quote. I was reading a book called Freakonomics. I think it's absolutely incredible. And one of the lines in there was data, I think, is one of the most powerful mechanisms for telling a story. And I think it's evident in the fact that this is the kind of digital PR summit in itself kind of centers itself around that, as well as some of the talks some of the guys have done earlier as well. It's very, very, very clear that data is very much at the heart of it and can sometimes help or hinder it. And I'll explain what I mean by hinder it a little bit later on, when you kind of maybe don't find the data that you were quite expecting, and how to kind of pivot around that and make it something that was a little bit more interesting than what you set out to begin with. So the fundamentals, we'll take it back to the blackboard, take it back to school. It pretty much breaks down when we're looking at data to either primary or secondary. And what I mean by that is primary being data or research that is collected by you. So these are surveys you've commissioned, focus groups that you've put together and ran yourself and physically collected the data. Interviews, so whether that be face-to-face, whether that be over the phone interviews, observations as well, so in terms of setting up scenarios, so similar to what Louise was mentioning earlier, where you kind of observe what is happening to that participant within an environment that you set up to control. So I think that was a gym campaign she was talking about earlier, and other just experiments as well. So quite recent ones that I think kind of swept the digital PR nation was the swab experiment. So we swabbed everything, I think, in the UK now. I think we're done and dusted with that one. But those types of experiments that bring you data in which you have commissioned the actual research yourself. And then there's a secondary element of this. So it wasn't me, it was Patricia. So if anyone has watched Split, brilliant film. And this is any data or research that was not conducted by yourself or your client. So for this context, it would be any like ONS reports or kind of industry reports, government reports, anything you kind of find that is already being collected, cleaned, or even rationalized by somebody else, and that is not you. Now, so why surveys? So why am I kind of focusing on surveys? So surveys are an incredible thing to kind of use from a data perspective, because firstly, they're quick. So a lot of the survey companies that I work with can get it to you within 24 to 72 hours. I'll probably put them on pressure now. I bet you're thinking, how come I got that survey in 3 days? You've got to put the pressure on them. I'm telling you, I'm joking. But yeah, that's typically the turnaround time for kind of short, I believe, less than 10 questions going to kind of a nat rep audience. What I mean by nat rep is like nationally representative, essentially, snap polls. So they're relevant and convenient. So it's your questions to your audience about your campaign or a topic. So it's very, very tailored. You can kind of control to an element or to a degree what is going to come out of that. You can get multiple angles. So if you write it, a well-written, essentially singular question can produce national and international angles. So depending on how you've kind of coordinate the questions and the kind of panel size you're going to, then yeah, you can come back with an insane amount of angles. And with angles as well, a little survey tip here as well is when you commission a survey, once you've got your results back, they typically will give it to you in a structure in which you've got your splits you've asked for. So whether it's your age, gender, region, location, whatever that may be, or even social media usage, whatever split you've had, is requested so that it's in a data extract. So the raw data, so you can see per respondent that has answered your survey, what have they clicked along that kind of survey journey? And then what you're able to do with that is create that multiple angles, because now I know, I can kind of say, okay, of this person, of the amount of people that have clicked this right at the beginning of the survey, how many of them went on to say X, Y, and Z? And so then it connects your research, and you kind of then have multiple angles in that sense, instead of sticking to the splits that you've chosen. If you think, oh, we need to re-angle this, absolutely look at the data from kind of a raw data perspective, and you'll be able to see what people have clicked and what they've then gone on to say. So it's a really, really good way of maximizing the kind of price per question, as it were. And they're trusted as well. So a lot of kind of political or current affair topics use surveys, or whether it's kind of snap polls to see where we are, or see how a certain political party is doing, or how a certain politician is being perceived. It's really trusted data, and we're in an age of where numerical literacy, numerical aptitude is quite high in terms of people want to see something backed by numbers. But once again, it's kind of up to us as well to make sure that the numerical literacy side is up to scale. So what I mean by that is you can say there is a 60% chance that it will rain on Saturday, which is probably true the way these storms are going. But for a lot, we assume as marketers that, yes, of course, there's a 60% chance that this will occur. But for the average Joe, they might see that, is it 60% of the day? Will it rain in 60% of the area? Will 60% of the rainfall that was supposed to fall that day? So there's a lot of ways of kind of perceiving numbers and things like that. So it's up to us to kind of make sure that it is continues to be trusted by kind of getting that message across really kind of plain and simple. And they deliver results. So if you go up, to be honest, on any kind of publication or news platform, or even on Twitter, or whether it may be, we are kind of surrounded by this survey has said this survey has said that, and it delivers results from a kind of coverage perspective and link generation perspective as well. And I saw an article earlier on from Moz that looked at the types of content, type of data techniques that gain links and coverage, and surveys was kind of really up there in terms of whether it's no follow or follow links and coverage in general. So have a little look at that blog, but it gets results at the end of. So when should we be using surveys? So I've had a quick look at the way not only I've used surveys at previous places I've worked, but also how we're kind of using surveys at the moment. And it kind of centers around whether it's emotional or divisive. So what I mean by that is, as Brits, what we consider rude to talk about, but we all really want to know. So things that kind of divide us, that we kind of want to keep secret to ourselves, but we're really kind of looking over the garden fence to see what the Joneses are doing. Those types of things really work quite well. What are people emotionally invested in? So the royals, so things that people kind of hold as intrinsic values or attitudes, that maybe they don't realize that actually other people resonate with that, or even are completely against that. And what are people arguing about right now? That's a really, really, really good one. So YouGov poll, they release 3 questions every day, in fact, and they're usually quite topical as to what is happening in the current global conversation. And so they're a really good indicator of what is happening right now, what are people arguing about, and what do other people think. And these are the types of things that really do well on surveys. How do you think and feel? And also the ability to show the degree. So yes, I agree with this statement, but to what extent do I agree with this? To kind of see how people sit on that kind of line. And then when the data isn't kind of freely available elsewhere, I will show you obviously other data sources, but they are really good for when you've kind of looked and you've done your kind of scoping and you've gone, I actually don't know if this data kind of exists anywhere, if it's collected in the way or the manner in which I'd like to talk about it. So it's not held by another client, which I'll kind of come back to on that sense. It's not collected regularly enough, because I know a lot of these large data sources, so whether it's the ONS or anybody else of a similar stature, they may dictate in which, oh, we'll collect this data every quarter or every 6 months or every year. And so then when you look back at some data sources, you're kind of like, well, we're in 2020 and I'm reporting on statistics that are maybe based in 2018. I know that is data that it's in the same format as I kind of want to talk about it, but I can get a survey to the equivalent factor now on opinions happening right now. So that may be the kind of way that we kind of go down. And with no access to FOI requests, I'll go over FOI requests in a little bit later, just to kind of explain what they are and kind of benefits around those. And when it's opinion or emotion led, so therefore ever changing. So as we say, your perceptions towards brands can change pretty much daily, weekly, or as an experience occurs. So those are the types of situations in which I would kind of be looking to commission surveys. And when the story is also time sensitive, so a lot of times, yes, we can collect this data, and I think the most one thing that we kind of all say is, oh yeah, collect the data, do due diligence. But in all terms and purposes, it takes quite a while to clean data. It takes quite a while to find it. Yes, we can kind of, I'll show you ways essentially of bookmarking, as well as, like Olivia mentioned as well, she's kind of got a massive repertoire of like amazing campaigns and methodologies and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, sometimes the data might just take too long to get out if that is a reactive thing that you need to kind of go out with. And so that it may serve better to kind of do a survey if that's going to come back within 24 hours. In fact, you can get a nat rep survey to about 2,000 people, maybe like 2 or 3 questions in a couple of hours. So it is a possibility to get that back quicker than data collection yourself. Now, you can kind of prepare for a lot of these things, but compounding factors can occur. So each one of those topics I've gone through, yes, you can kind of go, yeah, well, you can do that with free sources. Yeah, but you can do this. Yeah, but you can do that. And yeah, absolutely you can. But a lot of the times when surveys are being commissioned, it's the compounding effects of each one. So the topic is emotional or divisive, the data isn't freely available, and it's time sensitive, and it kind of compounds to go, you know what, we kind of need to turn it around and do X, Y, and Z. But I'll kind of talk you through as to how you can kind of minimize that need, because what I feel I've seen is it was born from a need in terms of these compounding effects, but now it's become a reflex, and it's the first thing to go to before we've even considered anything, because you know it's going to get your results, it's trusted, you're going to get that coverage, you're going to get the data you want, you can control it. But actually, it kind of limits you sometimes from a creativity perspective, and as well as keeping the cost down, because at the end of the day, it's money that is either leaving your business, whether you're an agency or even an in-house, where your kind of budgets are a little bit tighter and you can't be spending $2,000 for a survey each time. So just wanted to show you some survey tips here that I came across from a census-wide training that we did a couple of I think it's about a year ago now. They're amazing survey providers, and I kind of talk to them on a daily basis and deliver training alongside them. But these are the kind of tips that you can do to whittle down your questions. So yes, I've got to do a survey, but how do I then cut that down? So this is a really good way to go, right, I've run a question and I've come back with, right, 33% of people do X, Y, and Z. Amazing, right. But then how do I maximize that headline? Because if I'm putting it in my kind of outreach email and saying, or even my headline for my campaign and saying 33% of people do this, it might not seem shocking enough. Yes, a third of people is quite large, but it might not do. So this is a really good technique of taking that 33% and making that headline a little bit and using, of the sample size I have queried who exist in the UK, what would 33% look like? So for this context, then it became over 17 million people of us are interested in learning a new language. So it's a super simple way of kind of turning that small stat into something a little bit larger and a little bit more kind of shocking and eye-catching. And then second one as well, this is a very similar way to do it. So this is another question I get asked all the time, where it's how do you get your average cost or spend or any other numerical formula as an average within your survey. Now, a lot of survey providers will provide this at the end of the data set, but it depends how you've structured your questionnaire. So if you've structured it in the sense of the person maybe it has the ability to put the number in, and so I've spent £10, absolutely, they'll calculate that average for you. If somebody has a kind of a line section and they select on that line as to how much I've spent, but sometimes we bulk it into these ranges, so £11 to £20, £21 to £30. They won't be able to do that naturally. So this is just a quick way of how you can kind of do the maths to make sure that you get an average as well as the large stat that we were talking about beforehand. Sweet. So now you kind of know how to cut down your questions, why you should be running a survey, and you're kind of getting your max out of it. Here is a way to kind of then implement a strategy in which surveys aren't the reliance and they're not the reflex for all intents and purposes. So it all starts with ideation. So we said it in pretty much all the talks that have happened today. Ideation is probably one of the most important things when it comes to kind of putting a campaign together. Now, I saw a question earlier in which it said, how do I get ideas together or bounce ideas to people if I'm a one-person kind of marketing team, as it were? And so then this is where you need to kind of be following things like digital PR examples or anyone within the industry and looking at what is happening out there, and also then reading up on the methodologies, which I'll show you a bit later as well, to understand how they've done it. So not only do I know what people are talking about, but I also understand how they've done it, and then I can bounce those ideas off, even just tweet an ideas or grab somebody or even grab me, DM me, and we'll quickly talk about that idea. And it's the ideation, it's the bouncing around of ideas. Is this question unique enough? Is there a story here? Do people even care? So that is a big one. I think sometimes we might look over. So do people even care about this, or is it only cared for by marketers within our bubble? So that's a really good one to think about. And does the data exist? So when we start a campaign, the first thing that kind of happens is I will join the ideation process. So a lot of times maybe the data teams are a little bit separate to the PR teams or whoever else is kind of attending that ideation, whereas I make sure I attend as many as humanly possible. And the reason I can do that is because a lot of times I see a lot of data in my day-to-day, and I can pretty much tell you off the bat whether that exists or it doesn't exist. And so then we can kind of vet them as we go. Now, anyone who says we should do a survey gets a timeout immediately. So this is what I mean by this is, if you come to an ideation and you go, oh, I've got this idea, we should do a survey on. No, that's not the idea. You need to be thinking, what is that unique question? So I wonder if people do X, Y, and Z, and then what is the best kind of technique to get that data or information? So I've never mentioned in any of my ideations, I've never started a sentence or even said the word, we should do a survey on. And since then, I haven't spent a single penny on surveys, and it's setting that pace to kind of go, actually, no, there is other ways to do this rather than surveys being the reflex. And so then as soon as that happens from the ideation, we then go to a creation process. So can we collect the data ourselves now that we have the idea? Should we collect it ourselves? And is the source the best way to tell the story? So once the larger ideation team maybe has gone away, the guys will then come back to me and then go, right, brilliant. So of the ideas we had, which we knew the data kind of exists, and this is the kind of format we have, these are the ones that we've whittled down. And can we do that ourselves? How are we going to do it? What is the best way to kind of source this? Then that kind of immediately follows, is this the best way to show the story? So in that second process of creation, we also then have our design team in there, our kind of SEO guys as well, to kind of go, right, is this the best way to show this story? So that was the numerical literacy perspective I showed you guys earlier. And then, is this still even interesting? That's a question that you should be asking yourself all the way through. Are people bothered? Is this still interesting? And then at that point, we not only understand that the data is there, we are the right people to collect it, this is the right way to get that information or that data we have, and then this is the best way to show it. We're in a good place to have created a data-led campaign where we never uttered the word survey. Or if the survey is the best way, then, as we say, then we go down that route. But I'm yet to kind of be in that situation. So how to build a strategy that isn't reliant on surveys once again. So this was a really good campaign that we recently did. So Will Hobson is the love of my life, but also the bane. So he creates some of the best angles I've seen, and then kind of goes, Thierry, does this data exist? And luckily for me, I scramble and kind of find these types of things. So this was a campaign we did where we looked at whether money buys happiness. So we took some inspiration from other data visualizations that we've seen on things like Reddit and Instagram and things like that. And we saw this and we thought, actually, we can collect this ourselves. We are the right people to tell the story. And it was super, super topical. So this was out quite recently. And obviously, money is always kind of a divisive conversation, or even an interesting conversation to have a look at. What is the average value to buy happiness, as it were? And all I used here was the happiness index, as well as some data on average salaries in those given places. And it's just, as I say, we married 2 or 3 different sources and came up with this. Now, equally, we could have done this as well from a survey. Absolutely, not a problem. But then a global survey going out to a national representative sample for each one of those countries. I dare to think about the budgets. And then one we did recently as well was the chill score. So this was amazing. So this was for Missguided. And what we were trying to understand here is which films or series are the best to Netflix and chill to. I'll keep it PG in terms of you can think of chill yourself. But the data existed. So we married up IMDb scores as well as just certain facts on those actual episodes. So episode length and their kind of nudity scorings and things like that. And the data existed. This was the best way to show it, and our audience was already talking about it. And this did really, really well. It's on Digital PR Examples if you want to go and have a quick look as to how we actually put that together. But that was a really good example as well of data that already existed, and it was just a case of putting more than one metric together to create a story. And then this was a really good one as well. I really love this one, actually, because it was so topical. And what we looked at was the demise of the high street. So revealing the top thriving and declining cities and towns in the UK. So the worst and the best high streets on a scale of how many shops are closing, how many jobs in that area, loads and loads of different factors. And once again, it did really well, around 92 links to date. And once again, the data existed. It was topical. People actually cared about it because, considering what is happening at the moment, it's a very topical conversation to be having. And we were the right people to kind of be talking about that in the realm of kind of business survival rates and things like that. So all of this is all well and good if I don't tell you where on earth I got them. So I've written a blog on the Rise at 7 website called the Top 10 Data and Insight Sources for Digital PR Campaigns. So in there, I've just whittled down which sources I go to immediately and what they're good for, and I've linked out to those. So have a little read of that. There's 10 in there, but I didn't want to just recap 10 when you can kind of go away and have a look at that yourself. But two that I didn't kind of mention in there was the freedom of information requests. So these are really interesting because these are basically, you can request information from any government-owned body that works. So that is the police station. So that's crime rates, fine rates. You can even do it for museums, so you can understand footfall. So I did a bit of work with museums, and basically what we were trying to understand is, would we get our money's worth if we bought this collection to a certain museum? So we were able to FOI other museums to look at their footfall during the period in time that collection was there to kind of gauge, okay, is this worth our budget? I also do FOIs when I'm looking at purchasing a house or moving somewhere, so I can look at the crime rates in that given area. And they typically take about 20 working days for them to come back, and they kind of guide you through. A good website to look at is What Do They Know? That kind of talks you through what you should include, and you can actually put your FOI requests through that website, but I think you're limited to about 10 a day for certain accounts. So have a little look at that. That's one I didn't mention in the blog. And then site search data. So Luke, that is his Twitter handle, did a really good blog as well on that, on site search data. So site search data is basically anything that your audience types searches within your site once they come to site. So this is a really, really good indicator because it can do all kinds of things. So it can let you know, you can get things on what people are actually searching for in terms of trending topics. So is there a product that maybe you're not stocking that people are coming to your website and assuming that you have in stock that you maybe don't? even like names of celebrities and collections and things like that, as well as how people are searching for your thing or brand. And the way I use this data for kind of digital PR purposes is understanding the demand for certain things that we might not have thought are happening. So we saw a really huge increase in lingerie searches over lockdown. And so then that was something that kind of sparked a bit of an idea as to, firstly from an SEO perspective, as well as from a digital PR perspective, of like, how can we make this into a story, since we are the right people to talk about it and the data is held with us and it's proprietary. And then alternative ones is methodologies. I think it was mentioned earlier as well. I cannot bang on enough about methodologies. So methodologies, what I mean by this is, if someone else has done a campaign, go and read how they did it. Go to their landing page. They will always have a way of, we collected this data using X, Y, and Z. Click on the links of the data that they have produced and save it. Understand when that data is replenished and what you can therefore do with that data as well. I have, honestly, hundreds of data sources in which I've just kept and banked, and each time it's got to a position where it's no longer the digital PRs coming to me with ideas, data-led ideas. It's now my job to come to them and go, by the way, this is happening. Have you seen this from a data perspective? By the way, this data can tell you this, and spark ideas that way too. So methodologies, it is literally a free blueprint to how a campaign was done, and therefore the thinking and the rationale that kind of made that thing come to life. So use it. More recently, I've really fell in love with Reddit. So Reddit is awesome. It's a bit of a beast, but once you get an account set up, you can basically follow certain in kind of threads depending on what you're interested in. So I follow a lot of database ones or visualizations. There's loads of PR inspirations, all kinds of stuff, and this is a really interesting platform because there's a lot of data viz people who produce really, really amazing visuals, and they post them up on there. Now, what I use Reddit for is inspiration as to how I can better visualize my data. So this is a really good example of where the guys here put the best and worst countries for raising a family, and then that also the pickup on the left hand side as well kind of was a natural product of that. And so then I look at something like this and go, brilliant. So look at the amount of metrics that they've used to put this together. How can I take advantage of all those metrics that they've put together in another style or fashion, or completely different idea, since I now know that those sources are things that exist. So this is a perfect opportunity. I literally sit on my phone and just scroll through it, and save things, send them to the team and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so good. Or even sometimes it'll kick me to a data source and I go, oh, I never knew this was a thing that was collected. Let me just forward it straight to the team so they can have a quick look at that. Secondary data collected. So this is something I've been doing quite recently, right? So I know a lot of people say, I'd love to use that data, but we don't have it, or it's held by somebody else. I've just got to the point now where I just ask people. For example, in the Kids Know Best, they do kids research for people like Viacom and things like that in terms of consumption habits and affinity to certain characters and films and TV series and things like that. And so I really wanted some data around that, and I thought, they hold it. They're the best at collecting it at the moment. So I just DM'd them. So I found out who works there. I found a girl called Rebecca Stringer on LinkedIn. I then messaged Rebecca Stringer on LinkedIn and said, this is absolutely awesome work. I would love to collaborate with you guys. What would it take for me to get free data from you guys? They then laid out their, been like, okay, brilliant. We'd love to work with you too. This is what we'd kind of need. Absolutely free data. Thank you very kindly. The worst thing she could have said is no. A similar fashion, I did it to SoundCharge as well. I literally found their CEO on LinkedIn. I DM'd him and I said, look, I absolutely love the data source that you guys have got here. Can I get access to it? He was like, absolutely. We'll give you the data, not a problem, as long as you reference us. Bish, bash, bosh. The worst thing they can say is no. So takeaways, read every methodology. It's a free blueprint into how an idea or campaign was built. Bank the sources and techniques. Honestly, just bookmark them. They'll save you so many hours. Don't start ideas with we should do a survey on. Build the idea, then look at the best data to deliver it. And then join Reddit. So Charter Daily as well is a really good one. They're on Instagram as well as a newsletter. They do really good data roundups and like data snacks. And then YouGov Daily do exactly the same thing. 3-question polls that go out and to a nat rep population, just about things that are happening in day to day. And they're really good kind of inspiration gold lines. And yes, that was me at the lakes. on the weekend. Jealous, I know, even though I'm still sweating right now. So I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, any questions?
Amazing. That was really great, mate. Thank you very much for sharing such awesome insights. I think there's a lot of takeaways that people can get from there. And the questions are flooding in. Some of the first question we've had come in is, which type of survey platforms have you had the most success with?
So survey providers or survey platforms? I guess.
Yeah, the question is, which type of survey platforms have you had the most success with?
All right, okay. They're probably hinting at like things. So I've used I've used things like TLF. They're a really good one. Ginger Comms are awesome. YouGov is pretty much the one where you commission a survey with them, you're pretty much getting coverage. They're kind of the big boys and girls in town. And then there are other smaller like platforms out there where you can set up, as I say, a small question size, so like 3 questions that go out to like 2,000 people and get it back within about 4 hours. I cannot remember the name, but if you just give it a quick Google, literally just called Snap Polls. They're really, really good at getting really quick things. And as well, sometimes if the data you've collected sometimes may not be strong enough, you're thinking, oh, I just need that headline. It might just be that you need to go for, but it shouldn't always be your default.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I really liked that you said don't come into an ideation session with let's do a survey. It's something I've been saying for years, which was don't start an ideation session with let's do an infographic. It's the same sort of concept, and it's a great one to work with. Another one that's come in is, how would a newbie start to analyze data? Your top takeouts, things to look out for, and things to always be doing.
I think the easiest way to do it is sign up to newsletters in where they use the data. So, for example, ONS produce things like bulletins. They're not always kind of the sexiest content or whatever it may be, but it shows you how they've spoken about the information. So it'll tell you things behind it, and therefore how I can speak about it too.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's great. The next question that's come in is a really interesting one, actually. How do you deal with data overload? As an example, if you've got too many angles, to ensure that the story doesn't get too complicated, do you have a general cutoff point or best practice to the amount of data that you would include?
Yes. So I've always said to the guys, if they come back to me with 2 rounds of requests for data, is too much.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I mean by that is we've produced the idea, and then we've gone out and you've gone, oh, Thierry, we just need this a little bit more. Amazing. I'll give that. But then if you go, oh, I also need more of this. No, you don't. You've got plenty. We're just trying to milk something that doesn't really exist. And even in things like indexes. So indexes, there's been quite a lot come out at the moment, loads of indexes. And sometimes I've seen an index that has like 8 things on it, and it's like, that is complete overload. If your mum can't read and understand it, then it shouldn't be included in it.
Yeah, no, it's a great point on that. I think the mum test can work for all sorts of things, can't it? And it's so then the next one we've had then is, how would you go about creating a campaign using data from places such as Netflix or Spotify if you're a one-man band and have to create a campaign all by yourself?
Yeah, so this is exactly what I've been trying to do for myself as well, and making myself a one-man band, and it kind of trying to produce campaigns for the PR guys and do it that way. And so then what I've just been doing is picking up tools and techniques as to things like scrapers, for example. So you can pretty much scrape anything. So TripAdvisor, you could scrape TripAdvisor, and there is a lot of free scrapers out there, things like Parse Hub, or all the way if you're looking to kind of learn Python and things like that, where you can kind of go on their sites and pick out that data that physically sits on their sites, and pick that information out. So as I say, with TripAdvisor, you can do things like scrape the name, the starred rating, and also what proportion of that starred rating was excellent, for example, then
Yeah.
you've got an angle
Yeah.
being like, oh, this is actually the best.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this
And
is where like there's thousands of pieces of data and you just don't have time. So
absolutely. Yeah. Great. No, and for any SEOs out there, I mean, we use Screaming Frog for that as well. You know, you can use a tool that most SEOs will have, and you know, Screaming Frog is great for that as well. Another one that's come in, they're absolutely flooding in, is does that site what have we got? Does that site search data work for any site with the search functionality? I've always thought that you could only get this data direct from your client, not just for any brand.
Yeah, so it is direct from your clients. Yeah. Apologies, I didn't mention that one. Yeah, it is definitely is direct from your clients. You can't. I wish.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great. It'd be great if you could. It would be great.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
But with regards to other things like that, you can always use things like Google Trends to just see whether it's a trending topic and whether people are searching it, and it'll show you the aptitude towards that thing that you've searched and things like that. But apologies.
It's all right, great. And then the last one from our audience is, what would you suggest for someone who finds data overwhelming and their brain just doesn't work with numbers? If you're more visual, what would you recommend as a way to digest the numbers?
So this is where you look at like the pudding and things like that, and data is beautiful. So the guys as well, I've always told them, I'll never just send them data. Like, their job isn't to analyze the data. Their job isn't to do that. And so then I should never put that upon them. That's my job. And so what I say to them in terms of inspiration is looking at things like Reddit or the pudding or the data is beautiful. So these are the outputs for the data. So I need them to understand what the story hook is, and then I will work backwards from that and find out what the source was, etc. So view it in a more visual format. So before you find out, think about if you were deciding where to go to eat. Like, you're not going to go on Google and just go places to eat, and then you're just flooded with 3,000 whatever else. You might see it on Instagram because you're more of a visual person. You might, do you know what I mean? You might take suggestions from other people. So look at it in the most comfortable format and then work backwards from there.
Cool. Great stuff. And a couple more that have just come in, actually, is what's your favorite way to visualize data?
Oh God, that is a good question.
It's an interesting one, actually.
Yeah. What is my favorite? Do you know what I wish I knew more of? Python. Python seems to have some really good visualization functions, and I really want to work more on that. Flourish is a brilliant one. I think everybody should kind of get involved in that. Get involved or just learn. I say learn. It's super simple. It kind of, the user interface is dead nice. Flourish is brilliant. But in terms of actual like old school infographic type stuff, my favorite way of visualizing something is the similar like gamifying stuff that we've just heard just back then, where it's like not only do we have the data element and then the visual element, but it's also interactive. I love that.
Good stuff. Awesome stuff. So then the last one then is, what has been your experience pitching these data sources to US-based publications, and do you have any key takeaways to share with specifically to a US audience? Yeah, so US, what I found typically is the US doesn't collect data in any size or function in the way the UK does. I think we're far ahead in terms of the amount of data. Now, what I mean by that is like the free data, so the ONS and things like that. Now, each state as well kind of operates as its own almost country. So you can't blanket and be like, oh, the US data, if I, in my singular state, we collect this, I cannot assume that it will be collected in all the other states. So I've always found that difficult from a regional perspective. You can do FOIs as well, but once again, FOIs are state-based, and then you have to go through that way and figure out who owns and funds that through there. But the way I kind of work from data collecting from a US base is I will DM any data holder in the US or search, literally search in itself. Of course, good overview approach. Amazing. Good stuff. And then two from me, actually. One that I have for you, Thierry, is how far would you go back with data sources? As an example, we know that certain ONS data sets, as an example, publish a year or more behind. So the question I have is, if a data source is from, say, 2018 year, but there isn't a later version, do you believe this can still work? Yeah, I think so. I always say that we go back as the most recent reputable source. So if the ONS, which pretty much feeds 99% of the government statistics as well, have said that 2018 is the most recent data, then that is what you've got to work with.
Yeah, that's the hymn sheet we're all singing with. So the way you can obviously skip that is with the freedom of information request, where you can fill that gap and say, hey, I'd like the data from 2018 to date. But there are also a lot of restrictions around that. So how much data you can actually request from them before it becomes not free and it becomes a cost. Things like that. But yeah, it's a far more profitable source.
And do you think FOIs will change? I mean, I know there's a lot of organizations that clearly don't want to be sharing data for PR use. What are your takes there? Do you think we will see a point in time where we don't have FOIs available to us as marketers?
No, if anything, I think they should or might become a little bit more freely accessible. I think as we become more data savvy, because once upon a time, FOIs never existed as a thing.
No, of course.
And so I think as people get used to data being collected about them and used for PR purposes or in things that they can see face to face, I think in fact we'll start getting more and more. Now, if I worked in the government, what I would do is I'd have a front-facing interface and then a paid subscription service where you can access all the data you want. It's all collected in the right format, and it's actually monetized. And
yes, of course.
How they've
I know. No, it's a conversation we've been having for a while. I mean, I know it's obviously, you don't have to specify that use, as someone's pointed out in the chat, when you do put the FOI through. But I know, we've had certain instances where that it's not necessarily for the intended use, but the organizations see it as a nuisance. They see it as a pain in many cases. And you just get that feeling when you're getting the response.
Yeah, it feels like a burden to them. It feels like it's like
absolutely.
A burden. But also, even if they reject it and say, oh, this is too much to provide it, I just split up and send it again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great piece of advice. And then the last one from us, which I've asked everybody, is what's your favorite campaign that you've worked on in the past, and why is that?
Right. So I'm going to flip the coin on this one because it's not the one I've necessarily worked on, but I've had the pleasure of seeing and being around recently. And that was our recent Sandtone one that went out. I've never seen such creativity in SEO, just hands down. I think just watching it as well, I was kind of a person looking in and watching the team put it together and the ideas all batting around. And sometimes I think because we see the output, sometimes everyone's like, oh, that's a really good campaign. But knowing what they dropped and why they strategically dropped certain things and why they picked up other things and how it then came together, honestly, it's a work of art.
Absolutely. No, it's great piece. And I think it's certainly as an outsider looking in, what really stands out about that is the number of different ways that you were able to repurpose that content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's everything question-wise. From our end, thank you very much, both to yourself, Thierry, for taking the time out of your day to present a really great session, and to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. I think we've had some 5 really, really great talks, a really fantastic Q&A with John Mueller. And from ourselves, a huge thank you for attending, for taking the time out of your day. We will be sharing the videos later this week, and everyone will get a link to those in their inbox. And thank you very much. And we will hopefully be hosting another event soon, and we will keep everyone informed. So thank you very much, and take care.
Appreciate that. Take care.
Cheers, guys. Speak soon, everybody. Bye.